Our speaker this morning is Chad Stewart. Chad has been with the Forest Service or the BLM for 26 years. He actually started working in college as a summer job fighting fires, and that's where he got his calling, I guess. He's been a number of different places. He was with U.S. Forest Service in La Grande, Oregon, and then he was with Forest Service there, then he went to BLM, and he was in Carlsbad, California, and was an interagency fire management officer. From there, he went to Alamogordo, New Mexico, where he was fire and timber staff officer. Then back to Colorado, Steamboat Springs, where he was a forest ranger. And just last May, he was appointed acting forest supervisor for the GMUG. And most of you, I think, know GMUG stands for Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forests. He has a Master's of Science in Forestry, an MBA, and he's taken firefighter training and fire science at CSU. His additional endorsements include incident command, disaster response, and emergency management. So after I learned all of that, I don't know about you, but I thought with the forest fires in the West last summer, it's sure nice to know we have someone like Chad looking out over our forests. So it's my pleasure to introduce him. Would you please welcome Chad Stewart?
Hey, good morning. Oh, that's loud. I'll start down here. If this is too loud or too soft, just let me know, and we'll try to adjust. So, well, thanks for having me. I love these types of things. I love these forums because you just never know what questions you're going to get, and I think that's the most exciting part for me. So I'll talk a little bit about a little more than what was on my LinkedIn account, and then also a couple subjects that I need to make sure you guys are aware of, and then I'd like the bulk of the time to be open for you to ask me questions, and we'll just kind of see where that takes us. So to start off with, Chad Stewart. So I'm here about 9 months, and I came from Steamboat where I was a district ranger, and I settled here in Montrose. My kids are 5th and 6th graders, so they got into Combine Middle School. My 6th grader basically picked where we were going to move, so we ended up here, and my office is in Delta though. So there is a local district office here, the Uray district down the road, and Dana Garduno is the district ranger there, and she does a fine job, so I try not to step on her toes when I'm in town here, but she does work for me. So the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, Gunnison National Forest, about 3.1 million acres, 5 districts, one of them here in Montrose, right? Another one in Norwood, Gunnison, Grand Junction, and Paonia are where the district offices are. The diversity on this forest is probably what drew me here. We have everything from mining to 166 developed rec sites, 54 campgrounds. So we've got the full gamut on this forest. When I got here, I took the job as a deputy forest supervisor, and then Scott Armentrout decided to take another job. So those of you who know Scott, took a job in Department of Energy out in Portland. So battlefield promotion, I'm now acting forest supervisor. So I'll take a shot at the job, but it's not been flown yet. So as far as I know, I'm still acting until they tell me I'm not. So we did have some interesting stuff last summer with fires. I do have a fire background, so maybe we can talk about that a little bit. When I was in college, fire was a summer job, and I ended up deciding that was going to be my career. So I left pre-med, so my parents still remind me about that, but also went and got a forest ecology degree at University of Minnesota. As I was going along though, I had fire each summer, and so I came up through the fire ranks, which makes me very unusual for this job. So I went from the lowest digger to the top of the ranks in fire, and done everything from hot shots, smoke jumpers, helicopters, engines, all that stuff. So then I leaped over to the line officer job as the district ranger, which, like I said, makes it unusual because most people don't leave firefighter retirement behind. But I did for quality of life, and haven't regretted it at all because I love learning new stuff and guess what? This job doesn't disappoint. There's always something new to learn. Yesterday I was learning about mining and some of the stuff that we have to do with CERCLA for cleanup, and so every day is new. And there's always something to learn. So fires. So obviously this is my background. I am actually very well in tune with what fires we had here and the opportunities we had to use fire in the landscape, as well as need to put them out when they're going to hit values at risk. So certainly willing to talk a lot more in depth about the bull draw or anything else you want to talk about with fires. I always hear, like I've always got a couple questions this morning. What's snowpack look like? 125%. That's good, right? Yay, no fires? No, that's not exactly true. Because when we have a good snowpack, we usually have a good green up, right? So then the grass dries out. Oh, darn, we got fire season again. So it seems to be we have fires no matter what, especially with dead trees that we have around here. So that's why I say, well, our fire season still needs to be determined, what it's going to look like, but we're going to be ready nonetheless to deal with it when it does come. Something else I want to talk to you about real quick is the forest plan revision. It's a big deal. Forest plan revision is not something we can do quickly, or should we make it quick? We should take our time doing it. And the challenge has been with this forest is they tried a forest plan revision in the past that was not successful. So my intent is to get us a draft EIS by this fall. And that's ambitious, especially when we lost 35 days to a partial government shutdown. But we're back to work, and we're working on it. So right now it's being reviewed by the regional office, and it should be coming out for public consumption in terms of the draft. So these are this is important for you guys to know, because we're going to be rolling it out to the public and expecting you guys to interact with us on what we're proposing. And we've been using the county commissioners. If there's any in this room, thank you for your engagement. Okay, but the county commissioners have been kind of our key go-to, your elected officials. Have them host a meeting, and then we'll come and provide the information for all the 9 counties, including Saguache, that is in the Grand Mesa, Gunnison, forest area. So that should be coming out in the next month or two, and I ask you to watch for that. It's a big deal, like I said, to get public input and to be able to process that and incorporate that into our future plan. So that's one that's coming up. You need to keep your eye on. The last thing that people want me to talk about, just to make sure. Yeah, the temp hiring and fire season outlook and the furlough aftermath are all big deals. But I think in the end, we want to be able to say we're back, we're working. And it's kind of weird for me to say that, because I never stopped working. I was the accepted employee, the only one at the office, all during that 35 days. But in the end, we really kind of got behind, because nothing really kind of fell off the plate because we didn't get something done, but we're basically a month behind. And so there's a lot of things that are just not quite clicking quite yet. And I can say that because we're in the middle of an office move in Delta. My staff is not here to support me because they're busy trying to catch up. And I think that's the bottom line is thank you for working with us during the furlough, and for being supportive of the federal employees for that. And so a very heartfelt thank you for reaching out to those locally. But on the other hand, ask for some more patience as we start to get back to work. We are hiring. We're hiring our seasonals. We're hiring our firefighters. We're also getting our permits done, and we're getting all those out for people outfittering guides. And there's a lot of them, 160 outfittering guides that we're trying to get out the door. So it's just kind of one of those catch-up moments, and I think there's a lot of stress in the system. So anyway, those are kind of the subjects that I thought I'd start off with. I could talk a lot more about me, but that's probably not what you want to talk about. So I guess I would just say, let's open this up and see where you guys want to take this. And so we had another microphone that we're going to use. Thank you. And let's get the party started. Let's see if I can stay on my toes.
So this is how we're going to do, turn on. This is how we're going to do question and answer. If we can, is that loud enough? Yeah, it's a little bit loud. It just needs to go on.
I can use my hotshot voice if you want to use this mic.
We'll try this. It's coming up.
There it is.
Okay. So Q&A, just to kind of review how we do that, you don't just shout out your question. If you would raise your hand whoever is moderating will bring the mic to you. We want to make sure everybody in the room can hear your question, and that way the speaker doesn't have to repeat the question. So if you would raise your hand, we'll start with you.
Visually, when you look at the forest, you can see a lot of beetle kill. And in some places, it's very extensive. And then maybe a year or two after that, the trees, if they don't fall, turn gray, and then they, at some time, will fall. Could you kind of explain what the cycle is of the death of the tree, and then what would happen after that, and the likelihood of a fire based on those facts?
A small question. Let's see, the dissertation that I have on that would be fairly lengthy. So as a fire ecologist, I can tell you a lot of detailed information, so I'm going to try to hit somewhere in the middle of the road here. So we definitely have a bark beetle outbreak. There's always bark beetles in the forest. We certainly had some conditions that created an outbreak, whether it's drought conditions or no rain, weather, hotter. There's a lot of debate, but let's just say we have an outbreak. We've had an outbreak. We continue to have stands get hit. There's still some stands in Crescent Butte that have not been hit by a bark beetle, for example. So we're still evolving in this bark beetle outbreak. Contrary though, for the other side of that, I'd say that when I was on the route, we're past the outbreak, we're on the recovery side of that. So they've all moved through the looper and the bark beetles have moved through those stands, and so we're on the other side of that wave. So we're kind of in the middle of the wave on the gene web. So bugs have always existed, we're in an outbreak. What happens after an outbreak? You have mostly beetle kill is a tree of a certain species, of a certain type, especially those that are dense because the beetle can fly so far to infect the next tree. And then those trees turn red as all those needles die. And your fire severity jumps up considerably because those red needles are very receptive to any types of embers, and the fire spreads really, really fast, and they stay really hot really long because they're I didn't do that because they're dead, and we call it resistance to control. So resistance control, the wood is burning really hot. It takes a lot of water, a lot of resources, a lot of people on it to put it out. So resistance control is high. The fire severity is high. It moves very quick. Needles drop next, right? So the needles fall off. So now you have the dead wood, the gray wood, as you just talked about. The gray wood is standing there, and it's somewhat still merchantable from I know that you guys had a talk from Montrose Forest Products. It's still merchantable. They can still make it in a 2x4. And there's a window there between when the tree dies and when it's no longer merchantable that we try to get all the wood out. That's where we are today. That's where we are today, is we're trying to get as much of that wood out and create it into a product that's usable before it degrades too far into sawdust. So then it moves into the final phase, which the Rio Grande has quite a bit of that right now. That's in that on the other side of that wave of degradation. So now their trees are falling over with the winds that come in. And the fire severity is still high resistance control. There's still big trees that are burning, and they don't spread, the fires don't spread nearly as fast, but you can't just put a load of retardant on it and put it out. You gotta actually go in and still work it, so that's the resistance control. Then once those trees are down, your fire severity starts to go down as they sublimate, as they start to degrade into the, then they soak up water. So when you have your first rainstorm, they are no longer available to burn. And so that side also then releases the next generation. So most of these trees don't grow if there's any shade. They're just, that's the way they're adapted. So as these trees start to tip over, you'll see a flush of next generation start to come up. When we cut trees, we try to mimic that, and we will even do some planting to help that next generation come up quicker. And so you'll start seeing the next generation in the next 20 years start to take over as the forest greens up, because now you have green trees poking through the dead wood. And I mean, eventually that wood does go away. We do get moisture here, which makes this process work faster. We have more enzymes in the soil to be able to actually digest that wood. In New Mexico, for example, we just don't have that type of stuff. When we have a fire, we have an outbreak down there, the scar on the land is much longer. So we're in a good spot for seeing some good turnover. We are starting to see some of the next generation come through that dead wood that's starting to open up those canopies. But it's a long process. And we're in the middle of that right now, in the middle of that wave. And I think that's why we're spending so much of our time trying to get that wood out and harvested and then help that next generation come through. Right? Good?
Great.
Okay.
So I have a question on the integrated emergency management system. And I was wondering if you'd be able to explain the relation. Obviously, fire doesn't have any, recognize any jurisdictional boundaries. So could you explain the relationship between the Forest Service, the BLM, our county sheriff, our local fire districts, how that all works? And if you could maybe put some cost to that as well. And also, I wonder if you could address the cost of the state should the state take over management of our public lands.
Well, let's start at the end, right? The cost would be extremely prohibitive. So to start off, obviously it came with the fire rank, so I used to teach all this instant command systems. I even taught it in China and Sri Lanka and India. So we have a very desirable model that we use here with instant command systems. The NIMS, National Interagency Response System, and the local response system are all integrated such that, yes, fire knows no boundaries and we all work very well together. The jurisdictions are designed such that there's an initial attack period and there's an extended attack period, which definitely changes some of the dynamics that we have as far as who pays for what. Initial attack, your volunteers are first on the scene. Their first 24 hours are generally on them or on the state, depending on their agreement. And then after that, it moves into a longer duration event, either somewhere around 48 hours, and that's where the state or the feds step in, depending on jurisdiction. And the coordination that we have here is pretty exemplary. The emergency operations centers that we set up between interagencies runs very well, and I know that the fire organization spends a lot of time working together to make sure that happens. So there's a certification standardization that's in place in all these different levels in terms of when you order an engine, this is what you're going to get. When you order firefighters, this is what you're going to get, and you can rely upon that to be a standard. So that's governed by by FEMA at this point. FEMA took that over. So there's a task book system for experiential training as much as there's a classroom system for getting certifications. But in the end, you basically have a response system that's scalable to the incident. So as the incident evolves into a larger one, you can bring in different divisions or logistics or as you need it, depending on the incident. I've also worked non-fire incidents, obviously, and it's scalable for that as well. So there's so that's the system, the ICS system. The interactions that we have with the feds and the state are pretty scripted in terms of we have thresholds that we meet, and that's the whole declaring emergency sort of type scenarios. And that's where it always comes down to money. So the money is very expensive, and there's only so much that a county can bear. And once that is exhausted, then they turn to the state, and the state will step in especially for county and private lands for so long, and then they'll declare a national emergency, and that's when the feds can step in. But the nuance to that is with fire, when we have fire on federal lands and federal agency and money is involved right from the start. So if this fire starts on federal lands, we're paying for the whole thing, whether it burns on private or just stays on fed. So in the end, I spend a lot of time dealing with who pays for what, but that's good that I can spend time on that end and not on the other end of are the firefighters working well together, are they integrated into a system that's actually effective. That's all very seamless and run very well here, and that has a lot to do with leadership. And so the sheriff is tied in because of the way DFPC is organized in the state, and the local volunteers have relationships with my firefighters so that they're not meeting each other for the first time on the fire line, and so that takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination, but it's done very well here. And we also brought in some teams, I guess I would say that as well. We bring in instant command teams for like a bull draw fire that exceeds even our local capacity. And those people come in with a certain set of qualifications and certifications that I can expect to get a product from them as an agency administrator or that incident as well. So, any follow-ups to that, or does that cover what you're looking for? Cost-wise, I guess I could say a little bit to that. There's these, fighting fire especially is very costly. We've got, air tankers that cost $30,000 just to sit on the ground for the day. They drop a payload that costs $5,000 each time they drop. And these are just round numbers, but I mean, that's a lot of money. So you got an air show up there that's costing $250,000 a day. You got to really weigh out what is the risk that this fire is posing, and make some good informed decisions. And in the end, if you're going to put people at risk and put firefighters on the line, I hope that I'm doing it for a good reason. I got to value your risk that I'm protecting your home. That would qualify a comm site that provides FAA flight control. That's pretty important value. So you kind of have to weigh those out. How much is this value worth versus the exposure that I'm going to put these firefighters in? Because I guarantee you, if someone dies on this incident that I'm in charge of, I need to be able to answer that question. So it's a very serious business, but one that's not. There's no one size fits all for that. So it's basically you got to be in the system, in the incident itself, and try to make the decisions you can with the information you got, and be willing to make a new decision when you got new information. So it's very dynamic, but honestly, I love it, right? Because I keep going back to it, keep doing it. So it's certainly a lot of fun. I love getting dirty, getting paid well to do it. So.
I have a question.
Oh,
So I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. I'm like, wait a
So,
Yes, ma'am.
so last summer, we had some park rangers come from the sister canyon to the Black Canyon, came over here to talk about the things that are in common with the Black Canyon, and they're from Serbia. And so they talked about their problems with bark beetles over there and what they do for it. One of the things they do for it is they put pheromones in these huge boxes that are probably 6 by 2 by 4, something like that, I can't remember, but they're really big boxes. They put the pheromones in the boxes, and the bark beetles collecting them until it's completely full of bark beetles, and they dispose of the bark beetles. They've been able to control the beetle population very well with that. Has that been considered here?
That's been considered, yes, but not on the scale that we can implement. So the scale that they are implementing is actually a smaller scale, and in terms of like a 10,000 acre forest, and we have 3.1 million. So in the end, it's not scalable for us to be able to do bark beetle pheromone boxes, and quite frankly, it only affects the first 100 acres around the box. And so if you take that and extrapolate across the forest of how much we've got to deal with, it doesn't become a plausible type of treatment for us. The cost of it is also pretty prohibitive. We looked into that, I was reading a thing about 15 years ago of being able to do that, and they basically said that the success rate, the research branch basically said the success rate of that was not worth the cost. So in the end, we're talking about a larger landscape that will turn over and will regrow back again, but this is the phase that we're in of being able to harvest the wood instead of trying to protect it from the bark beetle. That's just the way we went. So does that help?
Renewal programs and replanting programs that are coming up. Are there any coming up for this physical?
So yes, we have a tree planting system. We also have nurseries that we spend money to do, that we actually collect from the sale of the timber sales. It's called KB dollars, and we put that in to grow trees and plant them. The design that we try to have, though, is we try to cut trees in a way that allows a natural regrowth. So in terms of, we don't put plot size more than an acre, because we know if they get more than an acre, there won't be enough seed source to regrow from the trees that we leave behind. So we tend to be under an acre for our plot size. So we actually try to design where we don't have to plant, but then we use planting to supplement when we don't see the regeneration that we would like to see. There's most of this is actually done through the contract that we have with the timber companies that actually harvest and buy the wood. They pay money into a bond, and that bond actually pays for that type of regeneration work. So it's actually, I was asking questions about this last week because we have $300,000 going into this planting program, and I was like, how successful is it here? Because in New Mexico, we get about 10% of the trees that actually succeed, and here they were telling me it's 90%. So that's really high, and I will be checking into that this summer and go and look at some trees.
I wanted to ask you about the Aspen Decline. What's the status?
Yes, sad. You know, sad is another one of those like bark beetles, always in the woods, but not necessarily felt as a landscape level issue. And so what we were seeing is a decline in sad, is a less sad new instance of sad. Now we have most of the new instance of sudden aspen decline happening right out here on the south face of the Elk Mountain Wilderness, and that's the new area that we're watching grow. And the problem is I don't have a lot of funding to deal with this. In terms of it's not a merchantable piece. I can't get timber companies to buy it. I'm trying to get gypsum to buy some right now, actually. But right now we're not selling, aspen to be able to treat that. So we have to go in and do something physically, to remove it or to pile it and burn it without infecting others. And that's just that's a very costly thing to do with very low returns. So we are trying to get partners to help us with this. And this is where I think some of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, and the Wild Turkey Foundation that we've been discussing with them, maybe we can work together on a stewardship where they could see some habitat improvement by treating some of this aspen that's in sudden decline and still meet their objectives too of getting more wildlife habitat. So right now we're in the process of working with partners to be able to address the places that we have, but we're not seeing it at a broad scale. Sudden aspen decline are pretty localized, and that's why I say the newest area that we're watching is right here in West Alp. So.
Do we have a definition of why? Do we
The
know why they decline?
short answer is no. The long answer is that there's been a lot of fungi type research that's been done that says, if it gets into the system, the aspen's like a one monoculture under the ground, that it spreads from tree to tree through the roots. And it's been, basically, that's the research that says it's a fungus, but I don't think anybody's definitively identified what fungus that is, because there are a lot of naturally occurring funguses in aspen, and why suddenly now it's detrimental to the tree is kind of still unknown. So.
Other questions?
All right. Where are we going next?
Right here.
Changing direction just a little bit. You talked about the forest planning effort.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the issues that were identified in the earlier round of planning and what the monitoring on that plan showed on those issues, and how the issues identified this time compare to the previous round?
It's a good question, and probably one I probably should have researched a little bit more. In the 9 months I've been here, I've not spent much time with the old plan that was unsuccessful. What I gathered from the old plan was that it's more of a 10,000 foot level. There was too much change that was presented, and so it hung up the plan, but not a whole lot of people getting on board with it. So I think it's more about the lessons I learned from the old plan, and the lessons were basically that there's some things that are working, like the range program is one that's working. So we're not tweaking the range program, we're basically carrying it through, saying we're going to maintain it. Now we have bighorn sheep that we have to address, and we are addressing that in the plan. And so the objective of this plan is more like to fix what needs to be fixed and not mess with things that don't need to be fixed. Something interesting about this plan, because I spent my career dealing with forest plans that have management areas that have objectives per management area. This is a wildlife area, and we're going to do this to create better wildlife habitat. This is a fire area, and we're going to allow fires to burn up to 1,000 acres in this area. Problem is that fire goes outside of that area, and then now it's in an area where I can't do this, and so I got to put the fire out, and that used to bug me. So this plan is being designed differently. This is not being designed by management areas. It's being designed by ecosystems and ecosystem management. So it's fairly new. It's going to be a different way of thinking about things, and I'm pretty progressive. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to allow us to do things that we need to do on the ground in a more effective way, and be able to respond to things like bark beetle differently, because it's more of an ecosystem management approach, which was not part of the old plan. I guess is kind of where I'm going for that. So this is going to be a different experiment, and it's going to take some time to understand it, because people are looking for things in the old plans that aren't going to be in this plan. So it's going to be just different. We're not going to be managing for an indicator species, we're going to be managing for an ecosystem. So, did I get it? I get close enough? You run it. I should be the one bringing it.
Population growth and then rural development into fire-prone juniper forest areas. What's the plans for that? Because if you build houses in juniper forest and have no mitigation, I mean, you still have to protect those houses, but is there any way to regulate that or have more ideas to stop the fires into those areas?
So there's a lot of different ways to enter into this conversation. The most interesting one lately has been about insurance. Yeah. Can you insure your house when you don't prepare it for a wildland fire? Insurance has taken a more active interest since the California fires in being able to tell people they need to do something about their forests. In general, we're talking about private land though, and so as a Fed, I'm not going to tell you what to do on private land. And so that's not where I operate. I operate on the land adjacent to the private land. And so I do a lot of stuff to when the subdivision comes in or being proposed, we are engaging in the county and being able to say, you know what, you should put an ordinance in that they should have, landscaping that's fire sensitive, fire prone, basically that's, xeriscaped or at least has a 30-foot buffer. Why I say 30 foot? Because the main thing that lights your house on fire is fire direct impact. So when the flame hits your house, that's what usually starts the fire, or in your leaves on your gutter. But in the end, I don't have a whole lot of authority to say what you should do on your, and I probably shouldn't, on your private land where you're building your house. So we try to engage as a partner adjacent to your private land that you're building on. The county can pass ordinances, and they have, especially in the Southwest. The insurance companies can say, we're not going to insure you unless you do things. So they actually have a better stick in this fight. But I can tell you on the back end of this, when I am a division soup and I have a fire where I've got multiple houses that are being threatened, I have to make decisions about where I'm going to put my limited number of resources. And I will make a decision where I can put a firefighter where they have a reasonable chance of success in saving the house, not where someone hasn't done the work. And that's the bottom line. When the fire actually happens, I'm making decisions out there as to where I'm going to put those resources. And if you haven't prepared your house, and that's going to make the firefighter at risk to be able to try and protect it, I'm not going to put that resource there. So,
Thank you.
yep.
I was visiting with someone last night, kind of in connection with Tom's question, and they own property on the fire by Grand Mesa above Parachute, and they
I was there for that fire.
they were all told to evacuate, and the people on the property above them refused. How do you handle that?
So I don't handle that. The sheriff does. The sheriff is, so each state is different. And I've lived in New Mexico and Montana and Oregon and Colorado, and they all have the same sort of laws where they have the right to refuse to leave. So the sheriff can go and tell them they should leave, but actually I don't think the sheriff even can make them leave unless they cross some sort of line of being a hazard to the sheriff or themselves. In the end, we have, and I value it too, I have high personal property rights values here, and so they have the right to stay if they so choose, knowing that we're not going to come in and get them when the fire comes through too. And I think that's where things start to get a little dicey. Like, oh, I want out now, and then I can't get you, And so there's I've had a number of close calls. I've not had any fatalities on the fires that I've been on. But the end result is that we take it up to the threshold of saying we really, really recommend you don't stay here, and here's why. And I've even gone to the things like, do you have dental records? Because we may need that to identify you. That usually gets their attention. So there's that worked in Montana, but in the end, they do have a choice, and the sheriff usually recognizes their choice, but that's who I leave it to work with the landowner. And ultimately, the sheriff does have the relationship, and I'm coming from Montrose. In this case, I went to Parachute as agency administrator for the federal resources, and And so no, I'm not going to tell that person they need to leave because they have every right to stay on their private property. And hopefully the sheriff can convince them when they need to leave or not for their own personal safety. So.
Other questions?
Thank you. We saw the notice this week about grazing fees being lessened. Explain to us why grazing is important on lands.
Why grazing is important? Well, you know, the traditional answer is that it's always been on national forests, even in the wilderness areas. And so grazing has always been a part of our natural ecosystems in the forest here. I say natural because it's been here long enough that it predates pretty much everything that we have on record. So so it's not natural, but it is a historical use that's been on the forest. In the end, there is benefits to what the grazing can do for the forest in terms of the ground, the available forage, and I also get hit pretty regularly. Well, if we just graze more, we wouldn't have as many fires. So they do graze the grass, which actually reduces some fire danger. My take on this is, in the end, there's room for all, and I think that grazing is a part of the Forest Service, always has been. And I think that it deserves to continue. It's a very hard way to make a living, and I commend anybody who decides to make that their life's choice of creating a life for themselves. It's very, very tough, and I think in the end, those who make it are very, very good stewards of the forest too. So I think we benefit by having an advocate and having someone use the forest just as much as they benefit by having that forage and a way of life that they enjoy. So. In the end, it's part of us. It's been part of us for a long time, and I expect it to be part of us for the future too. So.
This is kind of changing the subject, but back in the 2000s, we had a program on the Forest Service to buy back a lot of the ground, especially up on the Red Mountain area, that district, the mining districts.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of that coming back so we can pick up more than you don't have the houses out there on that property?
Yeah, the WCF did pass. So the money is usually what we're talking about with land exchanges, and the authority still exists. The priority for it has gone down just based on the administration that we have. And so it was unfunded for a year, and so none of the land exchanges or land selling actually happened. We have there's wildernesses that were created in the 80s. There's all kinds of different issues that we have where I've got parcels of land to administer that are completely surrounded by private land or just not administratable, and those are the pieces that we usually go after, is trying to consolidate and to reform the boundaries of which that we manage. In the end, there's probably more opportunity coming as a result of this passage of the latest Farm Bill, and so I think that there will be some money that comes to the table too that can be leveraged to make some of those happen. In the Red Mountain area specifically, those were a big win, and that was a really good thing. I've been reading the history on that, and I really, really think we did a good thing there. So. Anyway, so I think there's going to be more in the future. So.
Hi, Chad. Can you tell us more about those rec permits? You mentioned you're approving those. I'm imagining those are everything from, maybe not on your forest, but on south of us, to major ski operators to small outfitters. So I'm just kind of curious what those rec permits look like.
Yeah, it's pretty darn diverse. I think the ski area permits are a different permit system, so those are big deals. The outfitter and guide rec permits I'm talking about do run the gamut. They're from outfitter and guides that want to go in and hunt to people that want to have a church group, that goes in and camps on the forest for a week. So there's a lot of thresholds involved in there in terms of what type of permit. They're a nonprofit. They don't pay anything for the permit, but they still have to have one. So especially if you have 20 people, you got to have a bathroom. So I mean, it's not a rec conversation without a bathroom. That's kind of insane joke. But in the end, that's low. I had 160 rec permits on just the district that I was on the route. So in steamboats. So that gives you an idea. The rec permits on the AR and the Rapper Roosevelt and the White River are 3 times what we have. So I think what I'm seeing here is the people are coming. So the best we can do to help manage what we see as an increased visitor use is to be able to say, we got some consolidated rec permits, we have campgrounds, we have infrastructure we're putting in place to be able to go from diverse camping to designated diverse to campgrounds. Basically, the management starts to come up. So we're seeing a lot more requests for rec permits because they want to be sure they can have their recreation event or their business on the forest, depending on what the influx of people are too. So they're on the rise, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there's a lot more interest in doing things on the forest. There's businesses that are tied up in this. That's important for local economy, and so it's kind of a priority to be able to get done. And it's just a growing workload every year of people wanting to do stuff on the forest. So did I get it? All right.
Yeah, I think I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Did you say the bark beetle devastation has peaked and it's starting to
So
come
yes,
down?
I think, so I would say we're in the wave. So I don't know if it's a peak or we're just on the amplitude of the high part of the wave, but I can say the route is on the backside of that wave. So if you look at the route is on the backside and the Rio Grande is also on the backside of that wave, we're in the middle of it to the backside of it ourselves. So the word of caution is that there's still a lot of stands on this forest that haven't been hit. Now, it may just pass them by and it won't get hit. But if you go to Crested Butte and you look up on the hillside behind Crested Butte, there is a single age stand of spruce there that has just got to be like candy for people. And I don't know why it hasn't been hit yet. But so there are still some places where we could see it expand. I would just say that we're kind of in the middle of that wave.
Now, when Norm was here from Montrose Forest Products, he was talking about all different kinds of, I will say, beetles. It seems like they might be getting on steroids now, for lack of a better term. What are you seeing with other species of beetles and what's happening with that destruction in the G-Mug?
So love Norm, and Norm's a great guy. I love working with him. He's great. And and Norm and I talk about bugs a lot. The bugs that we are seeing here are not unusual. They're just a lot more resistance to anything that we've done for treatment. So in the end, maybe we should get some pheromone boxes, right? That's not the only bug, I think is the bottom line. So there's a looper for spruce. Every tree has a bug that ends up being able to kill it. It's just a matter of whether it's in an outbreak or not. Just mistletoe is also another, not a bug, but is also a thing that we're watching in the forest that could expand. Depending on another couple dry years, we could have a mistletoe outbreak. So the bottom line is the health of the forest is what we're gunning for, and this is what we do. Is we do veg management, trying to increase the health of the forest and make it resistant to these types of things. The health of the forest is not great, right? It's taken some hits lately, and that's where I think the logging and the treatments that we are undertaking are all intended to make it a healthier forest and make it be able to resist these. So I think your question in terms of what other bugs are out there, there's a whole host of them, and we could talk a long time about bugs, but it's not just about bugs either. There's other stuff in the woods as well. And in the end, a healthier forest just makes it resistant to all these things. So that's what we're doing, is we're trying to treat this forest and make it healthy. And Norm is a huge piece of that. Without this mill, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do nearly the amount of treatment that we've got. So yes, we're tied to the hip. We need each other. So.
When an area catches fire, how do you decide whether you let it burn or you try and put it out?
Well, we never let it burn. We always take some sort of management. In the end, there's a lot of discussion with the cooperators and stakeholders. So, what's your value at risk? What is out there that you want to protect? Is it a water source? Is it a house? Is it a power line? Is it? There's a lot of different things out there in the landscape. And so it starts off with initial attack in terms of a fire. Is it in a place where we can manage the fire within some certain boundaries, and whether it be a road or a rock scree or something. Those are some pretty quick decisions that are made on the ground by firefighters as they respond. So I have to instill in them some leader's intent as they go out the door of saying, this is an area you should look at. This is an area you definitely should not look at. This is Telluride ski area. You need to put it out. There's some different types of discussions that happen when we get into a larger event And that's where you start getting the county commissioners involved, you start getting the local elected officials will be able to tell us what is important for this larger landscape. And you can take opportunities to do things differently in terms of we can go very aggressive, very expensive, but very aggressive, and go really close to the fire line and put it out. We can back away from the fire line and prepare lines to burn out. We can even go as far as to say that we're going to lay fire on the ground ahead of it, because once it's burned, it doesn't burn again. So there's a number of different tactics that you can employ depending on those values and how you protect them. And there's costs involved, but that's usually not where the decision point is. The decision point is really in terms of, is this worth protecting or not? The Bull Draw Fire was an interesting one for us because when it started on BLM, I didn't have any concerns on the Forest Service side. I knew it was never going to cross that road up there, that divide road. And I knew that if it got close to that divide road, we could burn off of it. So there was no reason to send people over that hill, down into those drainage bottoms to try and catch that fire. And we were able to basically do that eventually. When that fire came out, came up to the road, we burned off that road very simply, very safely, and kept the fire from spreading beyond there. There are some collateral damage. There's some vegetation that got burned and possibly some rangeland that was not available for elk and for cows to graze on. So we had to weigh those out. And in my case, that was a firefighter safety call. I felt like it was just a better place to put firefighters and better utilization of the resources we had. So it's like I say, it's an ongoing conversation, but in the end, you try to base it off of the values that are at risk and have a conversation with the people that are the stakeholders to be able to say, what's the value to you and what's it worth?
Some of the fires we had this summer were in areas that were, my understanding is, wilderness, and you were not allowed to use motorized equipment in periods of prolonged drought. Is that a reasonable approach? And has the system considered exceptions to the no motors to enable you to better fight fires?
Yes. I don't know where you were referencing where they didn't allow to have motorized equipment. The take that I have is if you're in a wilderness area, because of wilderness values, you have to take into consideration whether you need to put in motorized equipment or not. I oftentimes will authorize motorized equipment in the wilderness for search and rescue and for life safety. And so that's a no-brainer. But if you have a fire in a wilderness area, do you need to put a dozer in there to protect the community next to the wilderness area? Yes, then we'll do that. There is a mechanism for that. The bottom line is the example that you had, hopefully it was based on the fact that we didn't need to put in motorized equipment, that we could manage the fire for resource benefit or for other objectives, and let that fire, more or less be able to use some of those barriers as a result of that, and not have to create them. And in the end, wilderness is something we try to respect the values and the reason why we have wilderness, and so doing that also has to be put in light of what's at risk. And so if you have a life risk, someone got an avalanche and they need to be evacuated, there's no question we're going to use motorized. But if you have a fire that's going to go out when it hits the lake, there's no reason. So it's trying to balance those two objectives. So, yep. Yes, ma'am.
What are the restrictions on agricultural burns, which occur frequently amidst subdivisions and agricultural lands, and it stings things up pretty quick, pretty often? And I'm sure, I don't know what the risk there is as far as fire starting goes, but it really affects the quality of air. And I was wondering what kind of restrictions are there?
Good. Yeah, outside of my jurisdiction, really. But, so I don't know what the local, is anybody here for this local fire? Just didn't want to step on anybody's toes, so. No, okay. So maybe you can help her with some of the local stuff, but there is EPA restrictions and a burn permit that needs to be gotten in order to put smoke in the air. And that's what we have to do too when we burn. So there are some restrictions based on that. I think fire risk is probably pretty low because most of these ag burns have roads all the way around them, and there's access to the entire field, so it's not like an access issue. So that's, from my perspective, it's a low, but that's what I'm dealing with, right? So, and in the end, I don't know what the local politics are for that, but there is a process in place where they will have to follow to get a burn permit and to talk to the local fire managers in order to do that. And part of that burn permit for me is to talk to the local adjacent landowners to let them know that what I'm doing and why. So maybe you can help me. Does that fit with?
Lori, did you have a?
No, I just had another question.
Oh, I thought you were a local. Sorry, my bad. So I thought that she was raising her hand that she was the local fire committee. So I've only been here 9 months. I'm still figuring out who's who. So
Here's an answer.
So the city has a burn pit permit, and you apply, to the city, because there is agricultural land within the city limits. Outside, it's basically the sheriff's responsibility, and the requirement for agricultural burns is to notify the dispatch center, and they will also notify the fire department. It also depends on like wind conditions. If there's like a red flag warning or whatever, they won't authorize. But basically, you don't have to fill out a permit. You don't have to worry about EPA regulations if you're in agriculture. It's just mainly the safety issue. If you do have a fire that gets off of your property, then it's your responsibility to have insurance or pay for the damages.
well said.
You have time for one more. Did you
Oh
have
my
a
gosh,
question?
time flies.
So when Norm came and talked to us about Montrose Forest Products, he mentioned that in the 70s and 80s there was a lot more permits for logging at that particular time. And he mentioned also that now that when the permits are decreased, then you have a lot more trees that grow up closer together, which increases the fuels for fire. And so I'm wondering if now with the logging of the bark beetle kill, that is more reactionary. And I'm wondering if in the future perhaps maybe something proactive could be considered and increase the number of logging permits again.
Active, this is the government, right? If I ask every single one of my employees what they would like to have more funds to do more work. And I think in this case, we would definitely be doing more tree thinning if we had the funds to do so. And that would bring that basal area down and the number of trees per acre down, and they'd all be healthier. So in the end, we try to get the best bang for the best buck. And at this point, if I got a $25 million budget that's now down to $17 million, what am I going to do with that money? So in this case, yes, we have the reaction to the bark beetle, and yes, we have a flush of trees that are going to come up after that, and we need to be prepared and getting cooperator help, kind of like what I was talking about with the Aspen, was to try and leverage our partnerships to make it a healthier forest in the future. There's no easy answer to this one. I think in terms of we can always use more money, we can always do more stuff, but the engagement that we have has to be appropriate in terms of what we want to achieve. In the end, there are places that are more important than others in terms of where the species diversity is, where the interactions are on the landscape, and where it's being used by the public. And so if you can prioritize that woods, which is what we're doing, we're basically saying these are priority areas, these are not, and these are where we're going to spend our time. So we have to prioritize the work that we have. We have a limited amount of resources to do, and we absolutely will try to not end up where we ended up before. And by keeping Norm viable and alive, I think that's a win-win for us to be able to keep those permits, those logging permits going, but they used to be called permits, now they're contracts. Anyway, the contracts are right now I could really just flood the market with trees. And that would not be good because then I would lose my market. So there's a weird market dynamic here in terms of how much trees I put up to sell and how much trees are willing to be bought. So right now a tree is worth about 70 cents a tree. So if you can do some economics on that, you can realize that it costs a lot more to put out sales than it does for them to buy it. And that's just the reality. So what I get out of it isn't really money to pay for a lot of tree planting, but what I get out of it is a healthier forest. So in the end, we need each other, like I said, but I would take another sawmill in a heartbeat if someone could put the finances together. I think there's a lot of dreaming out there on what we can do with this biomass, and I'm all for it. I mean, let's just keep doing it, because the only way this works is if I got both push and pull. I can push the wood out, but I need the pull out too. So if we can utilize that wood in different ways, especially small diameter, which means not the logs that Norm wants, the ones that are smaller around, the new stuff that's growing up. That would be a great benefit to me. And I think that, we can talk about cogen plants, we can talk about, pellets and all kinds of stuff, but those are significant investments with a very low return on investment. Hard to get people, this is the MBA to me coming out now, so it's a very hard return on investment in order to get those to go. But we're certainly interested, and if someone wants to take that on, we will be, I'd love that. I'd love to have more opportunities, so.
Actually, pardon me for doing this, but I'm going to address this to you. I would like to express my gratitude to the Forum ladies and gentlemen for getting a new home for us. So let's have a round of applause.
Thank you, and we would like to thank you, Chad, for all that information. When he first said, well, I just have a couple things to say, immediately you panic as a facilitator, like, oh my gosh, is it going to be done in 5 minutes? And he said that I want to open it up for questions, so thank you for all your questions.
Yes, thank you. Good questions.
You really helped us out today, and thanks to Chad for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Next week, we will have a very interesting program. If you read the Daily Press, it was a front page story, and it has to do with MoveMo. If you've seen those signs, it stands for, it's from the city, and it stands for Moving Montrose Traffic and People. And this summer, they have all kinds of plans for construction. So we'll have all kinds of opportunity to complain, and then we'll have next fall all kinds of opportunity to enjoy the construction. But if you want to know what's going to be happening this summer and how you need to reroute your normal way of moving about Montrose, show up and we'll have the city, it's Scott, right? Scott Murphy will be here to tell us what's going to be going on. Thanks for coming. We look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget to check your email. If it doesn't show up, we have it go out Saturday morning at 6 a.m. So if you don't find it, check your junk mail or your trash.